Hello, writer. We're going to take a look at your 5 characteristics posting, give you a bit of feedback here. So first things first, we'll look at your posting itself, see if you had any trouble with any of the formatting and things like that. Looks like everything is in there, temperature, contrast. Yeah, it looks like you have everything up there fairly well. The exposures, as far as the range from light to dark, they all seem to be handled pretty well by your camera. The camera is in program mode, so it is doing all of the measuring, and it is making all of the choices for you right there on the tripod. So things should be in good shape. When they're not, it just means that we either have a very difficult scene to measure for the camera, or that if it's an older camera, things like that, sometimes the metering system is not functioning just properly. Excuse me. So let's take a look at some of these images then. Overall, starting off with the temperature moving through into looks like you went into, I'm sorry, with direction and then moving into temperature, which actually was the third one that we did. We first worked on direction and then contrast, if you remember, and then we went into the temperature phase where we're exploring. Looks like you did manage to explore everything. White balance, normal. So normal, white balance, normal. The question is, what is normal? That would be a qualification there. So we might want to kind of look at just what normal actually means. It does say that, right? Normal, yeah. That way we can reproduce, because I'm not sure normal is a actual setting, unless you mean to say auto white balance or something like that. That might have been what you meant to say, but either way, we'll clarify that. But you can see here, like, for instance, the kind of wonderful sort of subtlety of color that you can achieve, even when there really isn't color in the image. These are dark, relatively neutral toned vases with brownish twigs with gray background and gray surface. So all the color, any kind of color shift or tone, is going to be coming from the light and the camera combination there. So you were able to achieve some really interesting ones with the combinations. A slightly green, let's see, that should be fluorescent when it goes to the slightly green. Let's see what we had here. It looks like 49, 36. Yeah, that's about where that would be, somewhere in the fluorescence range. So this bright blue, these, you notice though, when we're doing it with this technique, where we're modifying the temperature of the light and then modifying the white balance of our camera, we still maintain a clean white balance. We still maintain white, but we also have dark. The darks being somewhat shifted, but they don't seem all over like muddy or sort of like cast with just one single color. There's a definite range that's going on from intense color to less intense color as you're seeing the light change over the entire scene. This portion of the project, temperature, is really about exploring those two functions, introducing you to the subtlety of the temperature control on the lighting, also showing you where that white balance control is on your camera, and that you have control over it. When you shift it from one thing to another, It doesn't mean you're just matching something. It can mean an entire aesthetic consequence to it. So exploring those, knowing where that is in your camera's menus even, is an important part of the lesson. Here we're using the intensity part where what we're doing here is juxtaposing the key light with the fill light. And the main sort of objective here is to achieve a balance in the proportion of those two. So when we're talking about intensity, we're talking about the difference between the intensity of the key light and the intensity of the fill light. Both are going to increase the amount of luminosity in the scene because two lights are going to add to the brightness of a scene. However, we want that fill light to always be measurably lower in intensity than the key light so that it doesn't interfere with the active direction in our photograph. And here you're doing a pretty good job with it. It does seem like it's a little bit close to it. I might have even dimmed it down even more with the either the baffles or the distance of the fill light. Composition wise, I'm really interested that you're doing compositions that are very tight. You're moving in on the subjects. You're not being shy about letting things run off the page. Compositions like this, what it does is it negates the idea that these are bottles or jars or anything like that. It transforms them more into shape. The more you do this, the more desensitized you're going to be to the object itself, and the greater opportunity you're going to have to use metaphor and to use the shape as a stand-in for something that you're trying to communicate. Because even though we're just working with form right here, we're not addressing content. We're using the tools that would lead us to content. And so we want to pay attention to the things that we can use in order to get us there. And composition, where we put things, how we put things, the lighting, all of that can contribute to what it is that you have to say, which, of course, this is important. It's the this that you have to figure out. Moving into some of these others, when you're getting into the more loose compositions, this kind of got in the way a little bit here, where you have, it looks like the objects are on either corner. I'm not sure that they're actually participating with the overall composition. They may not have needed to be there, maybe just coming in even closer to it. Although I'm not exactly sure. This looks like a awfully hard edge here. There may be something else kind of strange going on with the photograph. But wow, that was an animation, wasn't it? Let's kind of come back to what we were looking at. However, looking past that, looking into the part of the photograph that you're actually wanting us to see it. When I'm looking at an image like this, what I can kind of get into is looking at what is it that I'm looking at here? What is the nature of what I'm looking at? Is it the interchange of shape? Is it the interaction of shadow and tone? What is it that is important here that I'm looking at? And that's the area that when you're a photographer and you're looking at making an image, you want to hone in on as well. When you start to look through that finder, you start to arrange things, move lights around, all of that kind of stuff. The idea is going to be making decisions is going to be about what is it that I'm actually trying to present here. Am I looking at an interaction between two objects, or am I looking at a gradation, a multiple gradations of tone? Am I looking at a pattern? Is that what I'm trying to bring forward? When you are able to identify those things, you take actions to simplify the image so that it addresses that most clearly. Photography is a subtractive medium, meaning once you begin looking through the viewfinder, you start the process of reducing things down. Looking through the viewfinder automatically announces a space. You're saying, this is where I'm starting. It's like starting with a blank piece of paper, only in photography, it's not blank. It's got everything in front of you. Once you've done that, now you're starting to choose what belongs and what doesn't belong. Unlike a drawing where you add things that belong, in photography, you are looking to remove things that don't belong, whether you're removing it by making it out of focus, or casting it into deep shadow, or removing it altogether physically, saying this doesn't need to be in the composition. That's the act of it. And when you're reducing down like this, there's a real opportunity for you to get real specific about what it is that you're looking at. Notice I'm mostly talking about composition. I'm talking about what your arrangements are communicating. The technical part of what we're doing, that's the easy part. Following the instructions, using the light, using the camera, that's simple. These things are largely, everybody is getting correct in the class because we're working together. I'm walking around. It's like an open book test. You can ask questions. That part of it is not really the key part in terms of your development. You need to know those things, and they need to be a part of your tool set. But the real language is how you're using those to communicate, how you're arranging them in a pattern or arranging them together to excite the composition so that it feels as if you are communicating something. This is important. We're not, having to scream it out loud here, but there's a possibility. I would wager that you can use a paper bag and make it emotive. So when you're making these images, consider, what is it that I'm really looking at, and what is the important part? Even if the important part is just a visual experience, highlight that in your mind and really start to focus in and hone in on that as you go. The rest of these images look all pretty straightforward. It does appear that you have a pretty good grasp of the fundamentals of composition, how to juxtapose things, where to place things. Here you've got symmetry. It's kind of moving about. You got the focus placed on that middle bottle, or whatever that candlestick or whatever that is, running off the top edge. Excellent. It's rather one note, but that's fine. It's kind of this giant announcement. It's not going to move my eye all around the page, but that's not what you're trying to accomplish here. You're trying to give us a sort of a one kind of powerful impact. That's different than composition where you might be moving our eye around. Something like this, you really have an opportunity to move our eyes around the composition. It's difficult when you start to add multiple objects here, because every single element in there is contributing to it. Think of it like another mark on a page. Every single element you add to a photograph, it is contributing to or interfering with, if it's not placed sensitively, but it's going to hopefully contribute to the overall meaning of the photograph, the overall movement that you're going to get, and the overall sort of message that you're trying to communicate to us. Small things that you can do to improve images like this would be to take a step 6 inches in. Getting rid of this, basically, like put your hand on the top of that. We don't necessarily need the top of this bottle with the cork. With that gone, it becomes purely a shape. It doesn't become this sort of detail back there, and it functions to break up the back space very well for us in that case. Over here on this side, this highlight right here, very high point of contrast, see, dark, light, dark, light, that is interfering with our eyes. It's keeping us from getting back into here. The most interesting part of this for me as I'm looking at it is the wonderful kind of highlights that you're getting right in here. The reflection of this and this and this into the jar, and then the sort of beautiful sort of cascade of light around here. It seems like that is what is drawing me to the photograph. So as I'm looking at it, I want more of that. Is that what you are looking at? Ask yourself that. When you're making these photographs, what is it that you're looking at? That's going to help inform you as to what needs to stay, what needs to go, and how to modify as you go. Handling of the camera seems fairly well done. Your focus is nice and crisp. It seems intentional. Believe it or not, it can be a problem for some students where they're having trouble seeing where to focus. Over here, again, if we were missing this part of the composition, in other words, just close one eye and kind of put your hand over it, and you'll see, makes it easy for our eye to travel back into here. As it is, however, with this information right in here and all this texture, it's continually pulling our attention away from what seems to be the interesting or the point of the photograph itself. So pay attention to those things. I think it will really improve what you do. Also, as you move forward, taking advantage of things like shallow depth of field and deep depth of field. Those will be things that we cover in the next projects. The activity of movement within the photograph when things are blurry, not in terms of out of focus blurry, but movement blurry. Adjusting your exposures, using manual control even to disagree with your camera and make images that would be sort of unorthodox when it comes down to like what we think of as a correct photograph. So that's what I have for you. I think you've got a really good start here. It seems like you have a pretty good grasp on the 5 characteristics, some tips and some observations on compositions and how to improve what's going on there. Of course, please ask me plenty of questions. I would be happy to talk specifically about some images if you're wanting to know about that. Otherwise, that's what I have, and I look forward to seeing you in the studio. All right, bye now.